So with that proposal, currently users can use their ADA with the Project Catalyst app to vote on the projects that they like to see succeed. Moving past that proposal, if it does succeed, is a user going to, delegate their ADA and have that representative vote on projects for them, or will users still be able to vote on proposals and eventually, protocol parameter changes in the future?
Yeah, I'd like users to be able to vote on proposals still. And actually, I'd like to extend that to any Cardano native asset. And there's been a lot of discussion of, can we take the Jormungandr chain, retire it, not have it as a side chain, but rather have it as a Mithril Hydra application. So combine those two things together and actually use the upcoming Hydra Tail protocol to basically do vote batching. And then allow voting modules to be plugged in for different governance systems and so forth. DREPs are kind of a different concept of delegative democracy, so liquid feedback. And the basic idea there is that we have 5 types of governance events that could occur. You have a protocol parameter update, you have a movement of treasury funds, that's an MIR movement, you have a hard fork event, and then you also have kind of some meta events, like if we had a constitution, you'd have to have some ability to amend and change that constitution. So kind of the high level rules of the system that go above and beyond a protocol parameter, like the monetary policy or how some of the governance things work. And then obviously you'd need some mechanism to fire people, so votes of no confidence or these types of things. So we've thought a lot around those governance events, and through a SIP-driven process, what we're going to do in November is roll out a bunch of SIPs that cover each of those categories and kind of proposes a tricameral model that we think is going to have a lot of good impact and people can debate. Now, it's an entry point, meaning it's not a canon. It's basically an idea then for the community to spend 2023 debating and cogitating, and then we can have some focused, scoped workshops and bring people together, get it through the SIP process, and then go and implement those things. Voltaire cannot be implemented unilaterally. You can't go like Moses from the mountaintop, come down with 10 commandments and say, God has said this. This is really a system for the people, by the people, and it really does need that validation. So everything from a constitution for Cardano would need to be validated by the ADA holders to a governance system. And it needs to have enough flexibility that people can come and go. And if people aren't producing value to the ecosystem, they can be fired. And if people are, that merit is recognized and they get elevated in that respect. So we've thought about this for years, and we built a lot of the base infrastructure, and Catalyst gave us a view on everything from voter experience to voter applications to level of participation to the types of things that people tend to be good at making decisions on, the types of things that they really have difficulty making decisions on. And I think we've now converged to a point where we're ready as an ecosystem to go full on and build a proper blockchain government system. And if we do that and get it right, I think we'll actually be the strongest cryptocurrency in the world from that perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was actually speaking with Frederick Regard, the CEO of the Cardano Foundation last week, and we spoke a lot about parameter changes and, where we are and where we're going. And, he didn't state this explicitly, but it seemed that, the Cardano Foundation, has really taken on, the role of thinking about the future parameter changes of K and A naught. Whereas previously, it was IOG's technical team, obviously with, community response. So I'm curious if that is, the direction of future parameter changes of, parameters like K and A naught. Is that the Cardano Foundation's role moving forward to think about those parameters?
I think the community, in consultation with expert groups together, are going to have to figure that out. And I think that should be done by an on-chain democratic process instead of a council of elders who decide from above. IOG, what we've always done is said, look, our goal is to get to stability. It's not necessarily fairness. It's not necessarily the most optimal. It's a relative maxima that we can live with to allow the system to be stable. And then I don't think small stake pool operators are fully aware that some of the things that you'd like to solve with the augmentations of K potentially could be resolved by implementation of technology like Conclave for federated pools, so you can batch together and get rid of the multi-pool operators instead of just have networks of federated pools, and also partial delegation, where you delegate to a portfolio instead of an individual pool, because most people, they just have single wallets. So those two innovations alone, I think, actually solve a lot of the variance problems that we have, and it will mean that the pie gets split up a little bit more and revenue improves. But the other thing is that you have to understand that it's not a static system. And when you look at input endorsers, for example, the way we're designing it it probably will result in a system that could tolerate tens of thousands of stake pool operators. And there's real parallel benefit to having them in the system, which means the entire reward model has to be rethought a little bit to accommodate that. The other thing is the reward model likely will have to be reevaluated from the perspective of having delegative democracy on chain, because you probably want to compensate the DREPs in that respect. And also, you're going to have more revenue streams as a stake pool operator with the existence of side chains. If somebody launches a side chain, the way we want to build them, the tokenomics of those chains are the rewards that are paid. They're paid to ADA holders. So instead of just getting an ADA return, you also get the network of side chains that are there. So the economics of a stake pool operator are going to change very rapidly. And it's important that people are aware of those roadmap considerations and they take that into a factor. So what we did is we said, let's get the system to a stable state and let's get a government launched. And once the government's launched, give people the tools and transparency that they need to start having real great conversations. Now, some of those are done through the SIP process, like SIP 50. And I forget the SIP for the Curb Benefit Pledge. That was another SIP that was community driven. And then some of those are done through papers and some of those are done through committees. I believe the best place for this to be discussed is a members-based organization. So basically form an organization. Everybody's free to join it. There's committees on that organization. It's merit-based. You do work, you get status. And then basically through that process, people can discuss a lot of these things and then ultimately let the community decide through some sort of voting process how to allocate and tune things, whether it be minimum fees or K or other of the system parameters. And if they really don't like something, give them the ability to hard fork as well. Now, the role of the foundation then can be an organization that has some objectivity and neutrality, and they can score things, almost like a government accountability office or an auditor like the Congressional Budget Office or these types of things. And they can basically come in and say, well, if you go with X, here are the consequences. If you go with Y, here are the consequences. And they have objectivity because they don't commercially benefit one way or the other in that respect. Having them unilaterally decide, the problem there is that they're going to have to build a brain trust and B, legitimacy. And the issue is it's not a members-based organization. The council is unelected, and unless they make structural changes to the Stiftung, they will not have community participation. And it's not clear how that would be done in the current model that they have. So substance follows form, and so you need a members-based organization that is dynamic, community-driven, and has elections in order for it to have legitimacy with something as serious and significant as the system parameters, the treasury system, hard forks, the roadmap of Cardano, and so forth. But that doesn't mean you get rid of expert organizations. IO is still around. The foundation is still around. You need a brain trust of engineers and scientists. That's what we do really well. Mm-hmm. And you need a brain trust of objective parties that are not beholden to financial interests and so forth, and they work for the community, and that's what the foundation does very well. And I think those augmenting the decision-making process will help that process along and get it where it needs to go. If you're curious about some reading, there's a great book called Demopolis, which kind of covers this and talks about this idea of direct democracy augmented by institutional support as an idealized form of government. And I think we're converging to that in the age of Voltaire. And I hope that survives the SIP process and we get that done in 2023.